Hello viewers, my name is Javon Wilson coming to you live out of 284 Media out of the beautiful British Virgin Islands. Now today I am so honored to be sitting down with Dr. Kedrick Pickering, who is also a leading doctor in the community and also our former Deputy Premier, to discuss the COVID-19 vaccination rollout here within the BVI. Now, we do know there's lots of pressing questions to go around, and so we are so excited to get into this conversation. We dive right into it after this quick commercial break, so stick with us.
Gentlemen, aspiring gentlemen, and our partners that hold us down. It's season 2 of The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, taking you on the most inspiring journey with the best and brightest distinguished gentlemen of the BVI. Raw, real-life lessons that translate to grounded, community-minded, well-rounded men like you've never seen them before. Governor Augustus J.U. Jaspert, Jovan Klein, Neil Klein, and so much more, turning modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen with yours truly, Ron Grant, a 284 Media production.
Viewers, welcome back to 284 Media. Now, Dr. Pickering, you continue to lend your voice to the conversation of COVID-19, and we are truly happy that you have made some time to sit with us today. So welcome back to 284 Media.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, the vaccines are here. We saw them arriving just a few weeks ago, and definitely quite a number of persons have been reaching out to get those vaccines. Are you surprised at the rush and the feedback we've been seeing so far?
No, not at all. I wish it was more.
Okay. And were you able to secure your first shot?
Absolutely. I had my shot the very first day the vaccine was administered. I was next in line.
Okay. And what was that experience like?
Nothing special. I had already made up my mind. I had indicated publicly that I would be one of the first to take the vaccines, and I was happy to have the vaccine. As somebody who work in the field of medicine, as somebody who have an understanding of the medical illness that COVID-19 causes, I was happy to do my best, not only to secure my own health in as best the way as I can, but also to encourage others to do likewise.
Now, we have secured the AstraZeneca brand. Are you concerned that the BVI has received, being that the AstraZeneca brand has the lowest efficacy rate so far, and especially since it has not been approved yet by the USA?
None of the above. To understand and put vaccines in perspective, any vaccine that is developed with over 50%, in fact, the benchmark is around 60-65%. So any vaccine that has been developed and has reached that level of efficacy has already achieved what is considered to be the major milestone. So the lower so-called efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine is of limited concern in terms of the overall benefits that can be accrued from using the vaccine.
All right. Now, we are hearing a lot of skepticism about these new vaccines in general. One of the points is that the new RNA vaccine is different from traditional vaccines. Can you explain what an RNA vaccine is and how it differs from traditional vaccines?
You know, the interesting thing about that question is to put it in perspective so that the average person can understand. Mm-hmm. And the best way to explain it is that with respect to vaccines, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, as two examples, or what is referred to as the old technology, means that it is technology that we've been using for decades.
Okay.
So we are very much au fait with what it does and how it works and what are some of the possible downsides of the vaccine.
Okay.
The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which are the new RNA type vaccines, is new technology. And I think what happens is that people get lost in trying to understand scientific details, which to me is where the problem lies. Because even for somebody like me, who is a physician and scientifically oriented, understanding the details of the new technology, it takes a fair amount of effort and time to appreciate it. So I think the best way for people to understand it is that with Pfizer and Moderna and the others that are similar, it is new technology. And with the one that we have received, AstraZeneca, it is older technology. And so new is what I think conjures up the problems for most persons trying to understand and appreciate, because we don't necessarily know all of the details going forward and what are some of the possible long-term consequences, sequelae, complications, etc. of the new technology, so to speak. It is no different than when new drugs come onto the market and they are put onto the market. It takes time for them to evolve and for some of the complications to be known with time. And so the details can only be known over time.
Okay. Now, many persons are of the perception still that the vaccine somehow will prevent persons from getting COVID-19. What do you want to say to those persons?
If I understand you correctly, you're asking...
persons are saying that once you get the vaccine, you will not get COVID-19. Okay.
Now, that is an extremely important question, and probably one of the most important questions for anybody who has taken the vaccine or are contemplating taking the vaccines. And it has to be explained from the point of view, from the perspective that vaccines in general do not prevent a person from being exposed to the particular disease for which it is intended to prevent. Very important. What the vaccine does is it allows your body to respond in the event that you're exposed to the particular offending agent, which is the virus, and you are better able to fight it off before it becomes a major problem in your body. That is the fundamental principle to understand and appreciate. You get a vaccine, you can be exposed to the particular disease, but it won't affect you in a way it will affect somebody who hasn't had the vaccine. And when you hear things like 95% efficacy or 75% efficacy, what it is saying is that in about 95% of the cases, you're very unlikely to become very sick from getting the disease. And likewise, in some of the newer situations, what they're saying is that the vaccine does not necessarily prevent you from getting mild disease, but it certainly prevents you from getting severe disease. So overall, vaccines in general are helping you to fight a situation that you otherwise might not be able to fight on your own without the vaccine. And we only have to look at the number of persons who have died to understand how serious the infection can be.
All right. Now, we also heard that the virus mutates. Can you explain how that happens?
Again, people are getting lost in scientific detail. Viruses, microorganisms with time can change their basic fundamental structure. That is one of the things that they can do. And all is happening in the world in which we live in today is that we now have better understanding, better technology to be able to detect and understand how these viruses are behaving. In years gone by, it would have taken probably a long time for us to recognize that a virus had changed its form, so to speak. But the fundamental structure, the basic structure, doesn't change. It changes certain parts. And so that is something that your body will have to respond to when it is offended by that particular agent. So I think what is happening is that we're listening and we are hearing scientific terminologies being used, and they're confusing us. But if we try to just understand the basics, then it is better for us to appreciate what it is we're dealing with. So a variant, a mutant, those are scientific terminologies. If you came to me as a physician and I start talking to you about the details of your disease and the complications, the first thing you're going to say to me, hold on a minute, doc, I don't understand all of them terms what you're using.
How do you break
it
that
down so that I can understand what you mean to me. I think that is the principle that we need to focus on and be able to understand it and appreciate, rather than trying to get lost in too much of the details, and especially details that are very scientific, so to speak.
All right. Now, just a few days ago, the United Kingdom announced that very ambitious, by July 31st, they will be able to vaccinate their entire population. And we do see medical experts on that end administering just one dose of the vaccine, and really taking the second dose, and instead of saving it for the initial person, giving it to other people. What do you think about that approach, and what do you think we can learn from that here in the Virgin Islands?
Those are issues can easily be understood from the perspective that those are logistics. The big issue is the vaccine available or not? Is the vaccine available in a place at a time where persons who need to take the vaccine and who want to take the vaccine can access the vaccine? There is no sense that something being available and it's not being accessible by those who need it, and especially those who need it the most. So the United Kingdom, from very early on, had ordered 100 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine. Their population is somewhere between 50 and 60 million. What they were doing was to secure the availability of the vaccine. They have the vaccines available to them. It is now just a question of getting the vaccines out to the various communities where persons can easily be able to access it. It's no different from having a supermarket. If there was only one supermarket in Rotong, and all of us had to go to the supermarket there to get our groceries, just think about how difficult and confusing that could be. But there are supermarkets and grocery stores throughout the entire territory, which makes it easier for persons to access their groceries and to be able to go to the shop when they need to go to the shop to be able to get what they want. So in terms of they setting a date to say that everybody will be vaccinated, they know that they have the vaccine and they know they have the capability of distributing it to those who need to get it.
All right. We see South Africa recently abandoning the AstraZeneca brand because it was not effective in vaccinating against a new and particular strain. Do you think that we in the BVI should be concerned about different strains coming into the BVI and potentially have to go through this process all over again?
Absolutely not, because the key component is to be vaccinated against the virus. In the event that there arises situations where a particular variant might be confronting us, then whatever is needed at that point in time will be then available. Because although you hear in the news about the new variant, so to speak, the drug companies have already altered their vaccines and the vaccine profile to be able to match those particular variants, because once they can identify the makeup of the particular virus, the structure of the virus, they will just adjust their vaccine to match the particular dimensions of the virus that they're treating. So those things, the way science operates nowadays, those things are not big issues in terms of the wider context of persons getting vaccinated against the main virus. You know something, Mrs. Wilson, what is important? It is not a simple statement when you hear that the devil is in the details, because the devil leads you down the wrong path.
Right.
You need to focus on what is important, keeping the main thing. That is what is important, and that way we won't get lost in the unnecessary details.
Well said. Now, what advice do you have for persons who are contemplating whether or not they should take the COVID-19 vaccine?
It's an individual choice. I mean, I I hate to say this, Miss Wilson, but from the time I know myself growing up, I hear that Jesus is coming soon and that you need to do whatever is necessary to make yourself available of the love of Jesus and
Right.
all that. But each one of us have to make the individual decision whether we want to be committed to serving Jesus or not. There's no difference with the vaccine. An individual person has the right to decide that they want to take the vaccine or not. That's an individual decision. The point to understand and appreciate is that you're putting yourself at increased risk for something that otherwise could be avoided. That is the simplicity of it. What is even more important is that to understand and appreciate that there is a greater good. And if each one of us think carefully about our fellow man and recognize that what we really need to do is that important to protect my loved one, to protect my family, to protect my neighbor, to protect my fellow colleagues, and ultimately to protect the country at large. If we just focus on the greater good, then we all won't be so lost in the individuality of it. Because otherwise, if we all only think about selves and ultimately about what is good for me as an individual, the world could never be a better place. And it can only be better if all of us do what is necessary. So while it is an individual decision, it also fits into a collective decision that is to the benefit of us as individuals and to us all collectively.
And I know that's the balance we're trying to strike. I know it's a difficult decision when people think about their individual liberties as opposed to that collective responsibility that you just mentioned as it relates to protecting community. You touched on that within your recent article. Just speak to us about a little bit about the civic responsibility in all of this.
Well, that's what it boils down to. For instance, in the context of the BVI, I don't think any one of us wants to go back to lockdown. I don't think anybody wants to be locked down in your home for 24 hours, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as the case may be. We've been there, we've done that. We don't want to go back there. But it is simple to avoid that. We now have a weapon against lockdown. We now have a weapon that we can use to basically reopen our economy. 35,000, 40,000 people in the BVI totally vaccinated. No fear of us really and truly having a major outbreak of the virus because each one of us are protected in some ways. Allow visitors to come into the country. Our economy starts to flourish. Anytime you understand that you increase the size of the pie, my size of the pie, my piece of the pie gets bigger. We've got to see it from that perspective, that although you might be making just a simple individual decision, if all of us make the decision to do what is right, ultimately all of us will benefit. The country benefits and all of us will be much better off from where we are now, from whence we've came, and to where we can be.
Excellent. Now, as we begin to wrap up, do you think that eventually we will get to a point where global travel or other activities will be restricted only to persons who are vaccinated? Do you think we're heading down that path?
There's absolutely no question about that. There's something called a COVID passport. You know, you only have to read the international media and you'll see it, splashed over most of the international papers. Because ultimately, the vaccine is the only way to really bring the pandemic under control. And therefore, what the World Health Organization have said is that it needs about 70% of the persons in the world to be vaccinated for us to feel like we have this disease under control. The World Health Organization has declared polio eradicated from the world, and it's primarily because the majority of people in the world have been vaccinated against polio. The situation with the COVID vaccine is that we can do it much quicker because if the vaccine is available and we just simply take it, then it puts all of us in a better position. There's no doubt. And I predict certainly by the end of this year, you ain't going nowhere without a COVID passport. It's like you ain't going nowhere without your travel documents, your passport, when you get to the airport or to the boat or wherever you're going to, and they ask you for your identification, if you don't have your passport, you can't get on the plane, the train, or whatever. Well, in the not too distant future, when you are checking in with your passport, your COVID document will have to be in your passport to show that you're vaccinated. Otherwise, it's not that the government is going to enforce it, It is the travel industry is going to enforce it. It is the cruise ships, it is the airlines, it is the boats, it is the trains that are going to demand, just like when you show in your passport, that you got to demonstrate that you've been vaccinated, otherwise you won't be allowed to travel. It's going to be that simple, So ultimately, all of us will have to have be vaccinated, or we ain't going nowhere.
All right, Dr. Pickering, as we begin to wrap up, what advice do you want to leave with members of the BVI public as it relates to just us forging forward within this pandemic, I think collectively? What
I've said, and I said it before and I continue to say again, the persons who have concerns about the new technology, Pfizer, Moderna, the so-called mRNA vaccine, I can understand if you have concern about the new technology and where it is headed. I mean, that is a reaction that I can't, fight anybody on. But AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson is old technology, which we know a lot about. And we know where it has come from and where it is likely to go. So the concerns there are much less in terms of what people are really concerned about. So I don't see any reason why there should be a big deal about taking the AstraZeneca vaccine. I don't see what is the real problem. But ultimately, like everything else, there was a time, I was sharing this before we wrap up, Ms. Willison. Yes. There was a time that, how old are you? You know anything about traveler's checks?
I don't.
You don't even know what traveler's checks are. A couple of years ago, you couldn't travel anywhere without traveler's checks because it was safer to have traveler's checks. Traveler's checks don't even exist anymore. You can't travel nowadays without a credit card. The credit cards themselves have evolved. Every credit card now has a chip attached to the credit card because of security, et cetera, et cetera. Right. If you pay attention to what is taking place when you're traveling nowadays, they are going to be using what is called biometrics. You just stare into a camera like, I'm staring into this camera now, and the camera is going to pick up all your details using your lenses, et cetera, et cetera. That's the way of the world. There's nothing you and I can do about that. Likewise, we're going to get to the point where if you don't have the COVID vaccine, you ain't going nowhere. So ultimately, we will all have to take it. And I guess we just take our time as individuals to be able to conclude that it is my time to take it. But the sooner we get to that point, is the better for us individually, collectively, and as a nation, much better for our economy to be able to bounce back.
Well, that was quite a mouthful, Dr. Pickering. I want to thank you so much for joining us and, of course, for continuing to be a part of the conversation. I know there are many questions and lots of uncertainty in this season. Persons really want to know what to do, especially now that we have secured the COVID-19 vaccines and also that more vaccines are on the way. So thank you so much for lending your voice and your expertise to today's conversation.
Thank you for having me.
All right, viewers, my name is Javon Wilson, reminding you to check us out at 6 p.m. today for our live daily newscast. But until then, do have a beautiful afternoon.